What's up guys, it's Raccoon back with another video, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at should you get the Canon 70D in 2020. The Canon 70D was one of Canon's higher end APS-C DSLRs, and at the time it was probably one of the best, but now it is actually two generations behind. There was the 80D and now the 90D. So this camera is actually quite old. It's from 2013. So it's getting quite old now. And its age brings the question, should you get one in 2020? So first I'm going to be going over the design and features of this camera. It has a really fantastic grip when you hold onto it, and it's very, very comfortable. I really like that about this camera. Compared to some other cameras I've used, I really like how this one just fits in your hand so nicely, and it makes it very nice to use. It also has a nice size and weight to it, so it definitely doesn't feel cheap. It actually feels quite expensive. I do kind of dislike the fact that it has a massive flash, and that kind of makes it look a little bit less professional. It makes it look a bit more like it's a consumer camera, not a prosumer or a professional DSLR. It also has a info display. I don't know exactly what they're called, but it is right behind the shutter button, and it's really useful even for video as well, of course, as photography. So you can just look down on your camera if you're holding it and you'll instantly see your settings, and this I find very useful. And of course it has a fully articulating display, so it's great for vlogging and video work as well. And it's also a fully touchscreen, so it makes it easy to navigate through the menus and just easier to control the camera. And starting off with the video specs of this camera are 1080p at 30 or 24 or 25 frames a second. It doesn't go to 4K, but it does do also 720p 60 frames a second, which is alright. But the 1080p I've actually finding is actually really close to a 4K resolution because of the high bitrate, which is around 90 megabits a second. So it does actually have a really nice looking 1080p, but compared to 2020 standards where cameras have 4K 120 and even 8K in the Canon R5, then this camera is looking quite outdated. But if you're not after 4K, considering that does take a lot of space, then this camera is still really good. And I'd also like to let you know this whole video is being filmed on the Canon 70D, but the B-roll shots were shot on the Canon 1200D. But as you can see right now, it is actually good. It has quite a lot of dynamic range as well, but the way I got this dynamic range was actually using a picture style called CineStyle, and CineStyle allows you to bring up the shadows and lower the highlights automatically in camera, so then it does give it a little bit of extra dynamic range. Onto the photography specs. It has a 20.2 megapixel sensor, which is an APS-C size, so it does have a 1.6 times crop. So any lens that says like 28mm, for example, or 35, which is what I'm shooting on right now, the 35 is about a 56mm and the 28 would be about a 44. So every lens you just have to times the focal length by 1.6. But at least it's not as small as a Micro Four Thirds sensor, which is a 2 times crop. So this is a good happy medium in price and also sensor size. This camera also has a burst frame rate in photo mode of 7 frames a second, so it is pretty decent for shooting live action and animals and sports. But in 2020 it's getting quite slow. The R5 has a 20 frames a second in electronic shutter and 12 with mechanical shutter. It also has a ISO range of 100 to 25,600, which is pretty good, but I wouldn't go over about 3 to 4,000 in either photo or video mode because it does start to get quite grainy. But if you are in a more well-lit environment, then this camera will still perform really well in both video and photography. And of course the mount this camera uses for lenses, it's actually a really good reason to buy this because it uses the Canon EF mount, which has many lenses, and you can buy them quite cheap on the used market, so you can get really good deals with the lenses. So to wrap things up, this camera is still great for vlogging in 1080p, and the 1080p it produces is really good, but I am disappointed that they don't have 1080p 60, so you could do slightly slow-mo at 1080p. That is where the Canon 80D comes in, but this camera itself only does 720 60, which is quite annoying in my opinion, but of course it is quite old. But in general, the 1080p footage you're going to get out of this camera is really good, and it's still a pretty good video camera, especially for the price of $400. And in photography, it's still a very good camera in photography. The 20.2 megapixel sensor is still great. You can still crop in quite a bit, especially if you're using it for Instagram photos. Instagram low resolution, so you don't need to really worry about the resolution of the camera. But even if you are printing the photos, it still has quite a large megapixel count, so it's quite good. The only thing that's kind of lacking in this camera is a bit better low light performance, and of course that 1080p 60, and that would really make this camera pretty much a perfect camera for me because I don't really need 4K as of now, but later on in the future I will upgrade to that. And also, if you're wondering why this video is in 4K, the reason is because I actually upscaled the footage to squeeze every bit of quality out of the video, because YouTube actually compresses the video a lot. So it would be recommended to watch this video in 4K if you do want to see how the actual resolution of the camera actually looks. But anyway, this camera is great for $400 and I definitely recommend it to most people out there. For me, it is literally probably the perfect camera, although an 80D would be a bit better for those few features I mentioned. But other than that, this camera is literally perfect for me, and I'm probably not going to be upgrading for many years until it dies. So hopefully you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, drop a like. If you didn't, drop a dislike. Remember to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.